Hello and welcome to this session. So we are continuing to look at The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. We have seen how this play has been designated as a memory play by the author, and there are a lot of techniques over here which show how this play functions as a memory play. Memory becomes a character over here, and the instances which are being documented here, the memories could be unreliable entirely, but nevertheless we realize that it is what propels the plot forward. It is what propels, shapes and configures the entire play and gives it some sort of a coherence as well. So the narrator here is a very convenient device, and Tennessee Williams uses the narrator for multiple functions. So the narrator, who also doubles up as the protagonist, Tom Wingfield, we find that he gives an added flavor to this entire play by participating in a conversation with the audience very directly. And right at the beginning we realized also that Tennessee Williams also gives a certain sort of a commentary through the narrator, and this was evident from the beginning itself, where the personal and psychological aspects of an individual's memory, it's also intertwined with how the nation has been responding to the post-depression crisis, to the post-war crisis. And here, when we are beginning to look at the beginning of the next scene, we find that the narrator is a very convenient device corroborating the actions which have been happening on stage. So we find Tom narrating, after the fiasco as Rubicamp's Business College, the idea of getting a gentleman caller for Laura began to play a more and more important part in Mother's calculations. Look at the terms that he's using over here. It became an obsession. Like some archetype of the universal unconscious, the image of the gentleman caller haunted our small apartment. So if we recall, just before this scene, there was this major fiasco with Amanda discovering the deception that she was subjected to, because Laura had not been attending her classes and she'd just been walking around in the city, in the park, and not attending the classes or taking her exams, though they had paid about $50 as tuition fee. And this brings an end to any kind of ambitions, career ambitions that Amanda nurtured for Laura, and which is where she also lands again in this single possibility of finding a gentleman caller so that her life would be secure. And we find that the terms that Tom uses over here, calculations about the manipulative nature, she's been driven to that, and archetype, haunting, and there is some sort of a premonition in this narratorial voice over here. And it's also a very convenient device, just so the author can also ensure that the audience are on the same page, that we completely are able to comprehend what is going on in the minds of the characters. So from this, it's almost like the frames move in with the swiftness of a cinematic action. So we find that the image immediately, it zooms in on a young man at the door with flowers, which is going to be Jim O'Connor. An evening at home rarely passed without some allusion to this image, this spectre, this hope. Even when he wasn't mentioned, his presence hung in Mother's preoccupied look, and in my sister's frightened, apologetic manner, hung like a sentence passed upon the Wingfields. So this is the role played by these gentlemen callers, the ones who never visit, the gentlemen callers who were a constant presence in Amanda's life while she was growing up, and the same gentlemen callers, same image of the gentlemen callers who are entirely absent from Laura's life. This becomes a continuous haunting presence. It's almost like the way Tom is putting it. It's hung like a sentence passed upon the Wingfields. The image of the gentleman caller, the young man at door with flowers, it becomes not just the image of a suitor. It is also this, the image of hope through which the entire family can escape. So Mother was a woman of action as well as words. So it's very interesting to note that though Tom Wingfield and Amanda Wingfield, they do not seem to be having the best of relations, but they do understand each other entirely well. And Tom seems to have a tinge of respect too for this woman. She began to take logical steps in the plant direction late that winter and in the early spring, realizing that extra money would be needed to properly feather the nest and plume the bird. She conducted a vigorous campaign on the telephone, roping in subscribers to one of those magazines for matrons called the Homemaker's Companion, the type of journal that features the serialized sublimations of ladies of letters who think in terms of delicate cup-like breasts, slim tapering waists, rich creamy thighs, eyes like wood smoke in autumn, fingers that soothe and caress like strains of music, bodies as powerful as Etruscan sculpture. So this is Tom speaking. We do realize that he has the mind of an artist. He thinks very creatively, and here he is also introducing us to this, the obsessive doggedness with which his mother is able to pursue things, about how she is part of this telephone campaign to rope in subscribers for this magazine. And we do find her time and again getting back to this task, even when she's in the middle of very turbulent things within the home. She never forgets to get back to this this act, this telephone campaigning with a lot of rigor, with a lot of intensity. And then these are instances where Amanda is making these phone calls to different women, and she is also the kind of a person who uses the metaphors from Christianity quite liberally, and she thinks of herself as a Christian woman, her family as a Christian family, which is why she does not want to permit certain things like D.H. Lawrence's novel, or she does not want him to use certain kinds of words, Tom Wingfield to use certain kinds of words, and there is a certain value system that she wants to uphold, she wants to pass on to her children. But at the same time, she also needs comfort in life. She also needs all of these sophisticated things that she was used to while growing up in in the American South. And there is a tinge of irony over here. While she's upholding the virtues of Christianity, Christian martyr, while she's upholding the virtues of this, she is also longing for a certain comfort, which does not sit very well with the puritanical values that she is upholding otherwise. So we find her making these multiple phone calls about asking people to renew their subscription, and we find that she's quite good in what she's doing, and she seems to be brimming with energy when she's at that. And this sort of a perseverance is something which is starkly absent from both her children. So the Continental Shoemakers, that is where Tom works. It's a warehouse where he's entirely unhappy. And right after this, we find that after Tom gives us a glimpse into the kind of actions that Amanda is capable of, we find that the scene opens with the quarrel between the mother and the son. So Tom is about to swear, and Amanda stops that, and they are these are all like staccato sentences, as you can see. They're both like really angry and hurling words at each other, and this is the crux of the problem over here. So Tom is saying, yesterday you confiscated my books. I took that horrible novel back to the library. Yes, that hideous book by that insane Mr. Lawrence. So this reference, this intertextual reference to a novel, D.H. Lawrence novel, which was banned, it's also giving us a glimpse into the kind of society that Amanda is part of, and this sort of a Victorian morality. It is interesting to see that it has seeped into the psyche of the American psyche as well, the early 20th century American psyche as well. And here she wants to control what Tom is reading, the kind of cultural capital that he is plugging himself into. And she wants her children to not be polluted with these things that, according to her, I cannot control the output of deceased minds or people who cater to them. But I won't allow such filth brought into my house. And this is where, this is, now there is another very delicate conversation over here, where when Tom is immediately reacting to that. House, who pays rent on it? Yeah. So this is again another ironical fact. Yeah. Though Tom seems to be entirely unhappy with his warehouse job, he seems to be taking care of the family in whichever way he could. He's been paying rent and he's now drawing attention to that, but Amanda does not want to engage with that much. So we also realize that with this, the stage directions in between, the details given within brackets, maybe this quarrel happened when Tom Wingfield was in the middle of one of his creative exercises, because he's an aspiring poet too, and he does have this creative bone within him. So an upright typewriter and a wild disarray of manuscripts are on the drop leaf table. The quarrel was probably precipitated by his creative labor. A chair lying overthrown on the floor. Their gesticulating shadows are cast on the ceiling by the fiery glow. It really does not matter what sort of conversations they are having, what kind of exchange that they are having. The violence is out there for everyone to see. That is what is more important. The exchanges are entirely violent, and this violence is further accentuated when at the end of it we find that one of the figurines that Laura is nurturing, that is broken as well. Yeah, so they do have this conversation also about, Amanda cannot believe that Tom is actually going to the movies night after night, which actually he is doing, but that's the kind of passion that she is unable to comprehend. Yeah, I think you've been doing things that you're ashamed of. That's why you act like this. I don't believe that you go every night to the movies. Nobody goes to the movies night after night. Nobody in their right mind go to the movies as often as you pretend to. People don't go to the movies nearly at midnight, and movies don't let out at 2 a.m. Come in stumbling, muttering to yourself like a maniac. You get 3 hours of sleep and then go to work. Oh, I can picture the way you're doing down there, moping, doping because you're in no condition. I'm in no condition? What right have you got to jeopardize your job, jeopardize the security of us all? So this is what it ultimately boils down to, the security of the family. So Amanda wants to invest her time, her energy and her resources only on those things which will guarantee security. And this is perhaps the greatest irony and challenge in the way of understanding what American dream is. What exactly would guarantee security? So the kind of jobs that are available, yeah, there are a lot of, there's a kind of wartime prosperity too that as we had noticed in All My Sons as well. So the kind of jobs which are available are not necessarily the one which would cater to idealist ambitions or creative ambitions. Like in the previous All My Sons we saw Chris Keller, and here we have Tom Wingfield. So these are these young men who are left completely disillusioned in this pursuit for security, in this pursuit for material comforts, because what they are looking for is entirely outside the purview of what American dream is literally offering. Of course, at the end of it, and there are a lot of these abstract things like prosperity, happiness and security, but the fact that it could mean different things to different people, that is something that plays like these are highlighting as well. Yeah. So here there's also another thing over here about Tom's obsession with going to the movies. There are these differing ideologies, we realize, at the beginning of the early 20th century about how to define entertainment. What is good entertainment? What is acceptable entertainment? What is religious enough? And what would drive you towards anything immoral? So these are some of the questions that these sort of plays are also foregrounding over here. So Tom is trying to also convince Amanda that he's not passionate about what he's doing, that he's not even he does not like this work that he has as Continental Shoemakers. You think I want to spend 55 years down there in that Citolex interior with fluorescent tubes? Look, I'd rather somebody picked up a crowbar and battered out my brains than go back mornings. I go every time you come in yelling that goddamn rise and shine, rise and shine. I say to myself, how lucky dead people are. But I get up, I go for $65 a month. I give up all that I dream of doing and being ever. And you say, selves I always ever think of. Why, listen, if self is what I thought of, mother, I'd be where he is, gone. Yeah, this is the father. So he's pointing to the father's picture. As far as the system of transportation reaches, he starts past her. She grabs his arm. Don't grab at me, mother. Where are you going? I'm going to the movies. So she's also petrified that Tom has actually spelled out the biggest fear that Amanda too has in her mind, that he will be gone too. Yeah, and Amanda is the kind of mother who wants to start a day on this positive note with the rise and shine, which is nothing short of this nagging refrain in Tom's mind. And he is also, contemplating running away. That is what, going away as far as transportation reaches. That's what he says, to get far away as far as possible from these systems, from both the warehouse, the family, and the stifling society that he is part of. Yeah. So this is, there's a tipping point that both of them reach, and Tom is now, there is this long narrative. She's literally lashing out at Amanda, telling her really terrible things, and also saying that, yeah, I'm going to opium dens, and I'm into drugs, I'm in the dens of vice, and criminals hang out. Yeah. So they call me Killer Wingfield. Yeah. So that I'm leading a double life, a simple, honest warehouse worker by day, by night a dynamic czar of the underworld. Yeah. So he is also articulating certain fears that possibly are there in Amanda's mind, but also venting out his anger in such ferocious terms. Yeah. And towards the end of it, he says, my enemies plan to dynamite this place. They're going to blow us all sky high some night. I'll be glad, very glad. I'll be glad, very happy, and so will you. You'll go up on a broomstick over Blue Mountain with 17 gentlemen callers, you ugly, babbling old witch. Yeah. So this is kind of a melting point, and it affects Amanda and Laura as well. So he goes through a series of violent, clumsy movements, seizing his overcoat, lunging to the door, pulling it fiercely open. The women watch him aghast. His arm catches in the sleeve of the coat as he struggles to pull on. For a moment, he is pinioned by the bulky garment. With an outraged groan, he tears the coat again, splitting the shoulder of it, and hurls it across the room. It strikes the shelf of Laura's glass collection. There's a tinkle of shattering glass. Laura cries out as if wounded. So this is how it ends. Every act of verbal violence or physical violence, it seems to be hurting Laura more. That's a tragedy of this. Amanda and Tom, they seem to be able to deal with this, and they will both, very soon, though, in a painful way, they will bounce back. But Amanda, since she lives in a different world altogether, it hurts her more, and that is symbolically represented over here when the glass collection shatters. Amanda is stunned and stupefied by the ugly witch, so she barely notices this occurrence. Now she recovers her speech. I won't speak to you until you apologize. And it will take a while for him to apologize, as we will also soon see. And Laura is also entirely shattered because there is fallen glass. It's all shattered. It's almost Laura herself who has shattered into pieces. So that is the only thing which makes Tom vulnerable as well. Tom stares at her stupidly for a moment, then he crosses to shelf, drops awkwardly on his knees to collect the fallen glass, glancing at Laura as if he would speak but couldn't. The glass menagerie steals in. So now we are switching to the next scene over here. We get a sense of time too. A deep voiced bell in the church is tolling the hour of 5 as the scene commences. And within this confined space of home in Tom's memory, that's where, these scenes are getting enacted too. Time and space do not seem to matter because they are always within the confines of this house, where the only things, the only markers of time are certain meal timings and also the time when Tom gets back home. So here, it's again, Tom is getting back home and he is quite unsteady. Perhaps he's drunk too. He fishes in his pockets for door key, removing a motley assortment of articles in the search, including a perfect shower of movie ticket stubs and an empty bottle. Yeah. So this also explains what he's been doing at night. Yes, of course, he had been going to the movies and he has been drinking as well. He finds the key just as he's about to insert it. It slips from his fingers, and it's all very clumsy over here. Such a pathetic figure over here, and he is perhaps looking back at himself and seeing this, seeing him cut a sorry figure. Yeah, one crack and it falls through, and Laura then opens the door. Tom, what are you doing? Looking for a door key. Where have you been all this time? I've been to the movies. All this time at the movies? Yeah. And then he opens up more when Laura is speaking to her. There was a very long program. There was a Garbo picture and a Mickey Mouse and a travelogue and a newsreel and a preview of coming attractions. It's also, a sense of these diverse forms of entertainment which are available out there. This is the early 20th century. The setting is the 1930s, and there's a lot of fascination about these newer forms of entertainment, but there's a lot of apprehension too coming from people like Amanda. So there was an organ solo and a collection for the Milk Fund simultaneously, which ended up in a terrible fight between a fat lady and Usher. And then, he talks about the big stage show. There's a magician, Malvolio, the magician. Yeah. So here what is most important for us to note is that while all of these newer forms of entertainment are available, it's also it's also a stellar parody of what happens in the city to the nation during the daytime. This is, of course, there's a preparation for war. There is this huge economic crisis, but nightlife seems to be entirely different. Yeah, this is, if we just look at Tom's life, the mornings he spends in this very boring, dull and drab warehouse, yeah, the Continental Shoe Factory, and his night is suddenly very exciting with movies, with magic shows. Yeah, so here he talks about the what he witnessed at the show of Malvolio the magician. He performed wonderful tricks, many of them, such as pouring water back and forth between pitchers, and then he's also giving a magic scarf which he got from the magician. He's giving it to Laura, and finally he talks about this trick which has completely bowled him over, completely fascinated him. The wonderfulest trick of all was the coffin trick. We nailed him to a coffin and he got out the coffin without removing one nail. Yeah, there's a trick that would come in handy for me. Get me out of this 2x4 situation. Yeah, so this is the crux of what he feels too, that he feels that he's stuck somewhere and he needs a way out. So just like the image of the fire escape, the settings at the fire escape, we find that there are these different metaphors, different instances which keep coming back to tell us that this is the only thing that he needs to a way out, to escape. Yeah, and Laura is also warning Tom that if they're too loud, they might wake mother up. Goody, pay her back for all those rise and shines. Yeah, so rise and shine seems to be this morning refrain which Tom now entirely detests. It don't take much intelligence to get yourself into a nailed up coffin, Laura. But who in hell has ever got himself out of one without removing one nail? He wants to get out. That's the implication over here. Without getting hurt. He does not want to hurt anyone else either. He wants security and peace and some sense of a future for his mother and for his sister. But he wants to get out as well. Yeah. So this is what he implies by, mentioning this, getting himself out without removing one nail. Yeah. As if in answer, the father's grinning photograph lights up because the father had evidently found a way out by just leaving, taking off to wherever, as far as transportation could take him. That's what Tom Wingfield also eventually wants to do. So here we bring this session to a close, and we find that the term given to this play, memory play, it really lives up to that term, because we find that the realism over here is it works as a complementary contrast to the memory narrative that Tom Wingfield is presenting over here. And while Tom Wingfield is narrating, he's also the protagonist that also gives us a certain insider's glance, this insider's perspective into what is happening in the Wingfield family. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.